When it comes to, understanding the premise of the hyper cash infusion strategy, which I'm going to, clearly define here shortly, so you can add that, 5K in 30 days or less. What we need to be mindful of is most businesses still have existing services that they're providing that aren't filled out or full. So the biggest thing is, me helping you notice and recognize that low-hanging fruit in your business where, you might not be capitalizing on it efficiently. There's no point of adding a new stream of revenue or anything. Step one is always optimizing the existing operation. So for this hyper cash infusion strategy, what I'm going to do is show you some concepts and ideas to help you understand where we're going here. So the first thing that we want to take a look at when it comes to our businesses is like, are our services filled out? Now, the probability is they're not all full, whether it's, some options of filling up services could include just, apply this to your own specific business. But let's say grooming slots. Okay. So you've got maybe 50 grooming slots per week or 10 or whatever the number is. How many of them are you consistently filling out week after week? If you don't know these numbers, you need to find them out. Daycare spots, boarding spots, training, let's say. Okay. So regardless, it's like, are you rather completing and filling out these programs consistently? And if you're not, that's okay. But how many spots do you typically have per week that are open where you would start to more specifically focus on filling these up? Because there's often tons of that low-hanging fruit money in the business. So with that, essentially what we would do is it's quite simple. In the sense of with existing services, all we're trying to do is, tap into our existing client base. I'm not trying to go and do like Facebook paid marketing ads or anything like that, because you probably already have a Facebook following. Most people do, or Instagram, or wherever you're at. And what you want to do is just, the reality is your account is probably just quiet, or you're not getting enough engagement. So a lot of the people who like or subscribe to you aren't seeing your content because it's too low on the algorithm. So what we need to do to help fill up these is really, double down on that organic marketing. And lots of ways that you can kind of start to do that, to overly simplify it, is just having more engagement-based posts versus like picture posts. So engagement is really just going to more mean likes, comments, and possibly shares. Shares are probably going to be less common, but the more comments and likes and loves and you can get from these posts, mean you'll go higher up on the list, so to speak, of more eyes seeing you. But for example, if you're just posting, let's pretend you have 2,000 people who follow you on, let's say, Facebook, and you post like a bunch of cute puppy pictures and maybe 20 people like it and one person comments on it. That's really gonna, allow you to see maybe five or your followers, maybe 5 to 10% of them seeing your content on their news feed. Now they'll see your content if they go to your page, but they're not often just going to go on your page unless they're deliberately looking for something. So you need to boost your engagement earlier in the week so that when you actually are going to try to fill out this grooming, daycare, boarding, training, whatever the things are, you've got maybe 30, 40% of the eyes of your followers looking at the content where you're like, hey, we've got some space in this service, come and join in. Okay, so that's the first way you're going to kind of get some of that hyper cash flow coming back into you. Now, excuse me, the second piece of it is, you could, another option to create that revenue and bring in additional revenue in a month from your existing services is pre-selling offers. So what I mean by that specifically is, like, let's just pretend you run a daycare and you have punch passes or a subscription or whatever it is. It doesn't so much matter, but hey, you're going to have this Black Friday sale. And for, your daycare, what you might be able to do is sell, let's say a 3-month subscription, which entitles them to get 10% off if they pay in full rate, like when you have that available. And then maybe if they do a 6-month subscription, then they get 15% discount. So these clients love what you're doing anyways. And they're like, oh, absolutely. I'm going to come forever anyways. Why don't I take this extra, this percentage off? But what it does is it infuses some cash flow into your pocket stat like this month, whether it's just because you want to do some capital investment or you're behind on bills or you just want it to be a record month, whatever makes sense to you. But typically what I do in these situations is also I would only offer a certain number of them. So when I'm going to potentially deploy this sale, it's going to be like, hey, we got 5 or 10 spots, whatever you think is reasonable for this offer, this pre-sale offer of 3 or 6 months packages for our daycare where you get this awesome discount. And then people are raising their hands left and right. You fill it up with people waiting, and you can utilize that strategy in another 3 months if you wanted to, and get a similar return or higher return if you wanted to take more longer term clients in there. So that's another way that you can do it as far as pre-selling. Now, I mean, you could, another way kind of pre-selling to be mindful of, which isn't offering any discounts, is like, we're going to do grooming. Okay. So it's not precisely pre-selling because they're not paying you, but pre-booking. So with grooming, what we could do is pre-booking. So they get their groom. At the end of their grooming, you're like, oh, okay, thanks. It was wonderful having you. Are you interested in us booking you in for your next groom? We really think 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks, whatever, depending on the dog, would be optimal if you can kind of get in a routine to come in then. And then they're like, yeah, for sure. I personally have been to service-based businesses for like massage and so forth, where I would come every single month, but I get distracted with life. So if we don't book it while I'm there, I'll forget about it until my body like really needs it. But it would be way better if I was on a regular maintenance of, say, massage. Same with their dogs, right? You might be like, this dog needs to come every 6 weeks, but they're coming every 9 weeks. So it takes you more work when they're there, and the dog is not enjoying it because they're a bit matted, perhaps. And it's a win-win for the dog and the person and you if they're on a consistent scheduled. And it's the simplest thing ever. You're literally just, taking their money. After you provided the service, you're like, hey, did you want to pre-book in for your next appointment so we can guarantee you we got a slot for you? And then you start booking way ahead always, and you're always on the front end of things. So then your grooming income becomes a lot more consistent versus, some people coming every 6 weeks, others every 9, whatever it is for them. You want them on that regular kind of routine for the dog's health and as well as your predictability. Okay, so pre-sell is a second one. You can obviously take this in any direction that you desire. For instance, if you wanted to like pretend you had some training services, you're like, hey, if you opt in to buy 2 classes right now, 2 6-week programs, will give you $50 off one of them. I mean, it can be whatever you want. It just depends on what your goals are. I don't tend to offer very many discounts for services at all, unless it's like, hey, I really want to bring in some additional revenue to meet a sales target, or if I wanted to invest in something in the facility, for example, like I want to buy some new flooring, so I want to get some additional revenue in this month. So that's something to consider, okay? A lot of this stuff, the grooming would just be done in person. Same with boarding. Oh, here's another great example. So you do the exact same thing with boarding. You teach your staff to consistently ask them if they know when they're going on holidays again, and if they would like to book their dog's next stay, when they're paying and taking their dog home. Lots of people will, but this will put you like 10 miles ahead to ensure that your client gets a spot with your daycare or boarding facility, as well as more predictable monthly income streams for you that you can notice, oh, we got all these bookings right now. Okay. So like half of this pre-sale stuff is all relating to just teaching your team a routine of asking if they'd like to book their next one. And then the other one is like, say, quarterly, you offer a lump sum payment option for a longer term commitment for, daycare or what have you. Now, what we'll do, this isn't lining up exactly the way I wanted. The other option is, your third option for the hyper cash infusion strategy, is you just offer more of your existing services. So that it doesn't mean, the caveat is that I'm not going to offer it at a lesser degree, and that my standards still have to be the same. But let's just pretend I'm able to get an extra team member in or staff member, and I can get more dogs through our program because I have more hands. Or let's pretend that you reorganized your daycare some, and you're giving some of the dogs that are staying with you, an hour break twice a day, which allows you to actually take 2 or 3 more dogs because they're not out all day long. Just for instance, it's not personally, in my opinion, super great if the dogs don't have a break at daycare, because they just need a cool down point. And sometimes when you have those dogs on break, you might be able to have another 1 or 2 out instead of them. We personally just do a nap time for everyone at the same time. But if your interest was to boost a few more dogs into your daycare safely, that could be an alternative. So I'm going to offer more. Maybe that means you set up another training class of an existing service you already have, or that could mean taking on more daycare dogs because you have the staff to do it or the space. With grooming, it might be, focusing more on specific services that yield the most return and are simpler to do. So you might be able to take on more grooming clients if, for example, you made a clear marketing campaign for, say, de-sheds, because de-sheds are fundamentally simpler, from my limited understanding, than like a full-on groom. And you might not need as much experience to do a successful de-shed, but the rate of return is pretty high in comparison to, say, a groomer with tons of experience spending 2 hours with the dog. Well, you might have someone with much less experience that gets paid less by the hour to spend an hour and a half doing a de-shed, but the prices is similar. Obviously, I'm not saying they are, it just depends on your current operation. So more of the same thing. But in my experience, oh, you know what? I'm going to throw in another one for offer more here. It's a little adjacent, but for instance, it was something that I saw come up with training facilities. So some training facilities will have a certain number of dogs they take in for classes, which is totally fair. I don't think it should be unregulated. I think it should be 6 to 8, depending on puppy or adult, or 4, or if you're doing reactive or whatever you feel is reasonable, and people are getting lots of attention and are happy with the results. But one thing I noticed with some of these training facilities is that they would have like a week off in between starting new classes. I'm like, why? Well, just in case, this and that and the other. I'm like, okay, but you realize that you postponing every class that you host by 1 week each round means that you're hosting like 2 or 3 classes less per year. And how much do you typically yield in a class? Oh, you know what? It's maybe $1,500. Let's just pretend. So I'm like, okay, there's $4,500 right there by the simplest tweak. Let's not have a week off for no apparent reason, other than you're like, well, what if the weather's not good or something? I'm like, well, we can figure that out as it comes. But just changing something as minute as that could yield your business, $5,000 in a year, or 4,500. And now if you're offering 5 or 10 classes, I mean, it's going to exponentially increase, right? Just by doing some simple math and looking at it from a more like, 3,000-foot view, instead of just like, oh, this makes sense, so we like it. And I'm like, well, dollars still have to make sense. So it's both things, not just one thing. Anyways, so this is the what you want to do. You want to fill up existing programs. Don't worry about offering new services yet, would be my suggestion, like new revenue streams, because if you haven't optimized your existing ones, you're just going to fall into the exact same kind of routine and pattern as you have with your new revenue stream. Is you're going to half full it, 3/4 fill it, and then you're going to try to jump to another one. The reason I know this is because I've done it. And I realized that I was in the same pattern, where I should have been spending more of my time trying to optimize my existing services before I added new streams of revenue. So I got distracted, because it's exciting building new stuff, when I'm like, I just got to do the day-to-day work of filling out my existing stuff. All right, so this is the what. Pre-sale, you got 3 options. I would use all 3, because you're going to maximize your return monthly. But this is the what. So why would you want to do this? Well, I mean, it seems pretty simple, right? Like, ask yourself right now, what I would suspect is more revenue, right? That's why I'd want to do it. I'm going to make more money, so I don't have to be worried about money as much. All my staff are working. I don't have to lay anyone off. I get to pay myself, and potentially I might not have to work as many hours because I've got more revenue coming in, and I can pay my staff to start to work myself out of certain areas of the business that were exhausting me. But the other big thing is getting in the habit of filling out these programs each month is not a single month return. You know, let's just pretend like you do add that 5K in 1 month, ensuring that you're optimizing your existing services. And that month, guess what you can do the next month? Follow the same plan. So now your 5K over a year turns into, what is that? 70, is that right? No, $60,000. So instead of just 5K, because you did it 1 month, well, now my services are all consistently full, and we added an extra 60K in revenue this year. I might pay for one employee's entire wage. And then you can also, of course, after this, start to add new revenue streams to get even more income coming in. So the big, consequence of optimizing your existing operations is you're leaving money on the table. And you also might not be serving your clients to the best of your ability. And they just don't know that you offer some of these services because you don't maybe market it well enough, or they're not seeing it on Facebook or on your website or whatever the circumstance is. So adding this additional revenue and optimizing your existing services will take a lot of strain off. But since you're doing it so much more proactively, in the sense of like, hey, I'm looking at the start of my month, I'm going to make sure I do all these things to fill out these services. You're not running around last second where it's 3 days before a class, like begging everyone to jump into your group class. 2-3 weeks in advance, you're like, hey, we got to start marketing for this now. And it takes so much strain off that day-to-day operation, and being like, are we gonna have to cancel this class? And for me, I mean, it's what I did in the past. I'm not being strategic enough. That it was stressful. It was hard trying to make sure everything fills out in the last day or two. And sometimes we got lucky. We just kept swinging, and we're like, oh my gosh, we filled it out in the last day. Oof, thank gosh. Not fun though, over the long haul. So anyways, if you feel like this is valuable, but there's a possibility that you may not know how to, create this engagement, how to optimize your existing services, how to set up these pre-sale offers to people to make sure they buy and you fill out, how to word, the grooming upsells or pre-bookings and so forth, as well as, how to set up these additional training sessions and everything. By all means, I can assist you with this. And I have numerous times in my own business, but also with other pet industry, business owners, to ensure that they add 5K minimum per month, just by optimizing their existing services and not even adding anything else. So if you feel like, hey, I'd like to add 5K to my month, shoot me a note, comment on this thread or a direct message, and I can definitely help you out with that. If you have any more specific questions about the stuff that I went over today, feel free to shoot it in the comments as well. And if you want, invite your friends to this group if you feel like it's of value to you and potentially them.